This girl pretended to attend Zoom classes for months until one day something shocking happened. Riley's cunning plan had worked flawlessly for months. Her 5-second video loop had fooled everyone into thinking she was attentively attending her Zoom classes. She lived her life carefree, spending time with her friends and enjoying her days away from the monotony of college lectures. The freedom she gained was intoxicating, allowing her to escape the strict control her parents and teachers had over her. But one Monday morning, everything changed. It was a routine day, with Riley starting her pre-recorded video loop before heading out to meet her friends. She felt invincible, as no one had caught on to her ruse. However, after returning home, she logged back into Zoom to see a notification that left her stomach in knots. Her teacher had stayed behind after class to review the lesson and noticed something strange. Riley's camera was still on. The teacher, curious, sat and watched as the same 5 seconds of Riley's video looped continuously. Her cover was blown. The teacher, who had once believed Riley to be a diligent student, was shocked at the discovery. Riley panicked. How long had the teacher been watching? Was the teacher going to report her to the school administration? What about her parents? The consequences began to flood her mind. Her entire future could be at risk, all because of one slip-up. As the reality of the situation sank in, Riley's hands began to tremble. She closed her laptop and paced around her room, her mind racing. The next class was scheduled for the following day, and she had no idea what to expect. Would the teacher confront her in front of everyone? Would she receive an email from the administration first? Each possibility made her anxiety rise. The hours dragged on. Riley knew she couldn't keep avoiding what was coming. That evening, she sat down and checked her school email. There it was, a message from her math teacher, subject line, urgent, class attendance. Her heart pounded as she opened it. Riley, I noticed something unusual during today's session. I would like to discuss your attendance and participation in class. Please schedule a Zoom meeting with me as soon as possible. Sincerely, Mr. Thomas. The message was brief but enough to confirm her fears. Riley slumped in her chair, staring at the screen. She couldn't think of a plausible explanation, and she knew lying further would only make things worse. She considered not responding at all, but she knew it was inevitable. This wasn't going to go away. Riley spent the rest of the night wrestling with what to do. She thought about her parents. They would be furious, likely cutting off her financial support as they had threatened. Without their help, she wouldn't be able to continue attending college at all. Worse yet, she knew the school could suspend or even expel her for dishonesty. The consequences were stacking up higher than she ever imagined when she first put the plan in place. By morning, she decided there was no point in delaying the inevitable. She replied to Mr. Thomas, setting up a Zoom call for later that afternoon. The time for the meeting arrived. Riley sat at her desk, her stomach in knots, staring at the Zoom window as she waited for her teacher to join. When Mr. Thomas appeared on the screen, his face was serious but not angry. There was a long pause as he looked at Riley, clearly thinking through how to begin. Riley, he started, I want to talk about what happened yesterday. It seems that something was off with your camera feed. I stayed on the call after class ended, and I realized that you hadn't actually been there. Riley's throat tightened. She wanted to shrink into her chair and disappear. Mr. Thomas continued, I'm not here to berate you, but this is a serious matter and I need to understand what's going on. Have you been using that video loop for all of our classes? Riley felt her heart racing. She knew there was no point in lying anymore. She took a deep breath and nodded. Yes, she said quietly, I've been doing it for months. Mr. Thomas leaned back in his chair, absorbing her admission. He was silent for a moment before speaking again. Riley, I'm disappointed, but I also want to understand why. Is there something going on that made you feel like you couldn't attend class? Riley was taken aback by his calm approach. She had expected anger, a lecture about responsibility, maybe even a threat of punishment. But instead, Mr. Thomas seemed genuinely concerned. She hesitated for a moment before opening up. I hate school. I've hated it since I started. My parents are so strict, and they've threatened to cut me off if I don't go. But I feel trapped. It's like I'm living someone else's life, not mine. Mr. Thomas listened quietly, nodding as she spoke. I can see you're struggling, Riley, but avoiding the problem by faking your attendance isn't going to make things better. You're not just jeopardizing your education, you're also losing out on the opportunity to find what you actually want to do with your life. Have you thought about talking to a counselor or finding another way to address this? Riley hadn't considered that. She had been so focused on the fear of being punished that she hadn't thought about what she really needed help. I guess I didn't think of that, Riley admitted, feeling a weight lift slightly as she spoke. Mr. Thomas gave a small smile. I understand. Look, I'm going to have to report this to the administration. But I'll speak to them and recommend that we work on a solution rather than just punishing you. You're not the first student who's struggled like this, and you won't be the last. Riley's eyes widened. He wasn't going to throw her under the bus. Relief washed over her, though she knew this wasn't the end of her problems. There would still be consequences, but Mr. Thomas was giving her a lifeline. Thank you, she whispered, her voice full of emotion. We'll get through this, Mr. Thomas replied. But it's important you take this as a wake-up call. Riley, you can't keep running from your problems. Let's work on finding a path forward together. As the call ended, Riley felt a mixture of fear and hope. She had been caught, yes, but maybe, just maybe, this could be the turning point she desperately needed. The days following the Zoom call with Mr. Thomas were nerve-wracking for Riley. Although he had shown understanding and kindness, she knew she still had to face the consequences of her actions. True to his word, Mr. Thomas reported the incident to the administration, and Riley received an email a few days later asking her to attend a disciplinary meeting. The night before the meeting, Riley barely slept. Her mind raced with worst-case scenarios: being expelled, her parents cutting her off, her future in ruins. She considered not going to the meeting at all, just packing up and leaving. But deep down, she knew this was her mess to face. When the day arrived, she logged into Zoom once again, this time for a meeting with the school's disciplinary board. The screen filled with the faces of the dean, an academic counselor, and a representative from the student affairs office. Riley felt the weight of their gazes, but she reminded herself of what Mr. Thomas had said. This was a wake-up call, not the end of the world. The dean, a stern-looking woman with glasses perched on the edge of her nose, began the meeting. Riley, we've received a report from Mr. Thomas about your prolonged absence from his class using a video loop. This is a serious violation of academic integrity, and we're here to discuss the appropriate course of action. Riley nodded, feeling the weight of her actions once again. She could hardly speak, so she just listened as the dean outlined the potential consequences: academic probation, a failing grade in the course, even suspension. But, the dean said, her voice softening slightly, we've also spoken to Mr. Thomas, and he's expressed a desire to help you, rather than simply punish you. So, before we move forward with any disciplinary action, we want to hear from you. Can you explain why this happened? Riley took a deep breath, forcing herself to speak despite the tightness in her throat. I know what I did was wrong, and I'm really sorry. It's just, I've been struggling for a long time. I hate school, I've hated it since I started, and it feels like I'm just doing it to make my parents happy. I didn't think I had any other choice. The academic counselor, a kind-looking man, chimed in, Riley, we're not here to make you feel worse. But we need to understand why you didn't reach out for help sooner. Did you know we have resources available, counseling services, academic advisors who can help students feeling like this? Riley shook her head. I didn't think anyone would care. I thought I had to just get through it, and I thought that if I faked my attendance, no one would notice. The counselor nodded. We care, Riley. This isn't the first time we've seen a student go through something like this. You're not alone, and there are options for you. We don't want you to feel trapped." The dean leaned forward. "Here's what we're going to do. You'll be placed on academic probation for the rest of the semester, which means you'll have to maintain regular attendance and pass your courses. We're also recommending you meet with a counselor to talk about how to manage your academic and personal stress. Finally, you'll need to complete an integrity workshop to understand the importance of honesty in your academic journey." Riley felt a wave of relief. Probation was far better than being expelled. She was being given a second chance, one she hadn't expected. The dean continued, "I hope you understand that this is your opportunity to turn things around. We want you to succeed, but that has to come from you. Do you think you're ready to make that commitment?" Riley nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, I'll do whatever it takes." "Good," the dean said. "This is your wake-up call. Use it wisely." The meeting ended, and Riley sat in silence for a moment, processing everything that had just happened. The weight of the consequences still lingered, but so did the possibility of a fresh start. She had dodged the worst-case scenario, but this was only the beginning of her journey to fix things. The following weeks were challenging. Riley attended every class genuinely this time, and although the material was still difficult and boring at times, she felt a growing sense of responsibility. She met with the school counselor weekly, where she unpacked her feelings about school, her parents, and the immense pressure she had been under. For the first time, she felt like she had a voice in her own life. Her relationship with her parents was still rocky. When they found out about the incident, they were upset, but they were also relieved that she wasn't expelled. Riley knew they had good intentions, but she also knew she had to find her own path, one that wasn't solely about meeting their expectations. Slowly, Riley started considering what she truly wanted out of life. Maybe school wasn't the right place for her after all, or maybe she just needed to explore different subjects until she found something that resonated. She didn't have all the answers yet, but she was learning that it was okay to take her time. Months later, after completing her probation and finishing the semester without further incidents, Riley sat in her room and reflected on how far she'd come. The girl who had looped herself out of her own life was gone. She was still unsure of her future, but at least now she was facing it head-on without the fear of pretending. And as she closed her laptop, this time with no need for a 5-second video loop, Riley smiled. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was finally in control of her own story.